Well, joining me now is James Campbell, investigations editor at the Herald Sun. He hasn't had to go too far to get the story of the day, though. Today, at least, James, it's the Labor Review. I know you live and breathe for these types of things. Look, is the big look? Let's just start at the top, I guess, James. What's new here? Or what didn't we know? What surprised you?
The surprise, perhaps, is the candour. They're not shying away from it. There's really something for everyone here. If you don't like the Labor Party, you'll find plenty of reasons to enjoy reading it. If you do like the Labor Party, you'll be, it's like a TV series that ends with the hero's death. It's just, it's a sad read. I mean, it's very interesting. Some of the stuff is just practical, i.e., they need to deal better between the national and state campaigns. There were a lot of people in the state offices around the country who could sense that things weren't going well, but they weren't listened to. Better candidate vetting. They fell behind in the digital technology race. They were clearly superior to the Coalition in 2016. The Coalition spent a lot of money on fixing up its digital game, and Labor acknowledges that they were superior at this election. Some of the things they don't really have an answer to. There's a sort of plaintive cry in there that Labor should pursue an attempt to regulate spending by candidates, well, i.e. no more Clives. Well, that's not going to happen, not while this mob are in office, and it's certainly or until George Soros or someone out here.
They want truth in advertising, but they're not talking about Mediscare when they talk about that. They're talking about death tax.
Everyone should be nicer to each other. Look, they also, but at its core, they say, well, the tax policy, franking credits was a problem. Yeah, people didn't like it. But weirdly, the people that weren't affected by it, didn't vote against them. The people who voted against them were lower income, basically people who were suffering from some economic disadvantage and or precariousness in the economy, that it created an overall sense that the economy would slow down under Labor. The tax itself wasn't the issue, but then they replay the thinking that boxed them into this. Essentially, Labor had committed to a large suite of spending policies that required money. They had to find it from somewhere, and the way that they fell upon was the franking credits. And if it hadn't been the franking credits, it would have been somewhere else, something else, given that they were committed to income tax cuts for lower income people. How do you get around this? They don't really want to go into the problems with the spending policies. They say, well, the spending policies themselves were fine. Labor needs to be a reformist party. Well, that doesn't necessarily it's either one or the other, isn't it?
Well, yeah, look, they seem to talk about here, they don't want to be small target, but smaller target, I guess, is how you can sum it up when you're looking at, we can't have all of these policies and it was too much, but we can have some of the bold agenda. I guess what blew me away was the hubris, not having this campaign committee somehow. No one seems to figure out why they didn't have this sort of centralised committee. Being behind on, digital and social media, why did they think the Coalition were going to sit there and twiddle their thumbs? 2016, remember, that was a shock result too, and they sort of went, oh, well, look, we've killed off Turnbull since then, we're going beautifully. And mentioned prominently were the odds by betting agencies. Like, that's really relevant. We look at this stuff every now and then, but it's something to talk about. But if you're running a campaign, I just can't believe you'd be citing this sort of thing.
Well, one of the things that it does talk about is that all the polls were wrong. They had no data that contradicted to them, except obviously on the ground. But they don't really talk about this. The bit that I can really spot is that they should have been picking. I mean, they knew Shorten was unpopular. Why there was no, why they didn't think that there was a disconnect between the polling they were seeing on Quant, the numbers, and what their quality of polling was picking up on Shorten. They just chose to believe what they wanted to believe. I mean, part of it is part of the suggestion is really is that part of the reason they didn't come up with this is that they were too busy. It appears so many events happened. The Section 44 crisis led to a series of by-elections which consumed their the campaign, the National Secretariat's attention. There was the constant threat that there might be an early election, which led to them to concentrate far too much on seat-by-seat polling rather than getting ready for a national poll. One of the other surprising findings is that they never really worked out a reason why people should vote against the government, which might seem an obvious thing.
As in, at least in those last few months, post-Turnbull with Morrison.
Correct, but they didn't enunciate it. They weren't negative enough. The election became a referendum on them. They had a huge policy agenda that involved a lot of spending commitments that crowded each other out. They were promising to raise some people's taxes. The government wasn't. Morrison had one or two lines. They also completely failed to adjust to the arrival of Morrison, although it's not clear what they could have done. They say, oh, well, they should have done more research on him. They should have, no one, I mean, here we are 9 months later or whatever it is, or a year and a bit since he got into the job. No one's yet worked out a way of denting his popularity. Obviously, it may be that there isn't a way and that he will sail on for a number of years. But they didn't. But they couldn't find one in the time available, and it doesn't appear as though they really looked. They just hoped that the previous, what had worked up till then, would keep working. Again, there's the Bill issue. Yes, Bill was unpopular, but they all say Bill did a good job. Bill was a good leader. Bill held the show together, but the public just never seemed to like him and didn't seem to like him. And Clive Palmer spent, whatever it was, $1 million demonising him. Not clear that Anthony Albanese is going to be that much more difficult for them to knock over.
Indeed. Look, we'll see. I think that's a good point on those negative lines and exactly how they try to frame that. They've got plenty of time at least and another summer to figure part of out James Campbell.
What's your major take on it? What's your big takeout on it? I mean, are you surprised by it? I mean, what surprises you most about it?
The thing that blows me away is the hubris and the concession of that. That we knew that, they thought they were favourites, but we all we spoke about was the relentless Labor machine in the lead up to the election and the extent to which apparently it was just cruising along in third gear. I'm going to have to go, James Campbell. We'll talk about it more next time.
No worries.
I'm getting a rap in my ear and I'm already in trouble. We'll let you get back to reading it. Thank you.
I don't want you to be in trouble, Tom Cole. I don't want you to be in trouble.